Hello everyone, welcome to Maximum Attack Rallying and to a video that's going to be quite busy. I think there's a lot to talk about, isn't there? We've had a lot going on. Two rallies over the weekend, two big rallies over the weekend I should say. Three really I suppose, actually, thinking about it. One's really only relevant if you're British, one's really only relevant if you're American, and one's a world thing. So there's lots to talk about there. Before we get to that, which is the main focus, I'll try and keep this short. I think the big development since then has been that we've actually got a first look at one of the 2022 cars. I say that because I don't actually think the car we saw is what we're going to see next year. So M Sport have finally given us some pictures of one of their tests and a little bit of access to one of their tests of the new car. It seems that finally they have got the hybrid components back from Compact Dynamics after them being recalled earlier this month, which was not a good sign. So they've got that back and have been running the car in Spain, so we got a bit of a look at it. Visually, I mean, there's not really a lot we can learn, is there? At the moment it looks like a Fiesta. They've trimmed the wings and things down a little bit to get a bit closer to what next year's regulations are going to be, but I mean, really, there's not a huge amount we can learn. The rumours continue to circulate that next year's M Sport car will actually be a Puma anyway. When I say be a Puma, it will be Puma-ish looking panels tacked to the outside of this FIA space frame business. There was something to learn from that, wasn't there? The lighting's terrible on this video, isn't it? Anyway, sorry, distraction. Yes, there was a little bit to learn there visually, because it looks like, weirdly, there is a section of this new safety structure going vertically downwards, pretty much in the middle of the door aperture of this Fiesta. That seems quite strange, and that you would think would make getting in and out of the car very difficult. How that looks going forward, I think, is going to be something to keep an eye on with the other cars as we begin to get a look at them, and how that all works. Is an interesting one, isn't it? Very interesting indeed. Also, for me, the car that we saw testing looked a little bit out of proportion compared to the current Fiesta WRC and to the road car, in that the rear side window to me looked quite long. Difficult to tell with the camouflage on the car, but something didn't look quite right there to me. That should be no great surprise. This safety cell business, scaling, space frame nonsense, which I really still have a big problem with, means that it is likely that these cars will look a little bit further removed from the road cars which they claim to be based on. Obviously they're not based on at all anymore, because it's just a FIA spec chassis effectively, that they then tweak to use their own suspension and things on. So that for me is nonsense, and I'm really uncomfortable with that idea in terms of how we go forward. But it is what it is, as we keep seeing statements from Yves Maton about how we should keep pushing forward with this new regulation thing. In terms of the hybrid element, I get that need, and we saw Rich Milner say earlier this week or late last week that it is an essential thing for Ford to back their program. But for me, I just think the whole way the regulations have been designed is slightly farcical, and especially given what's going on in the world right now, I really think that last year we should have just stopped the whole thing and had a bit of a rethink. But I was thinking earlier today, I think the irony that Toyota felt that they couldn't continue to develop their car for 2021 in the light of the COVID pandemic, so they've continued using the current car, albeit with some modifications. It is quite telling, isn't it? But the FIA are dictating that we must press ahead with cars for next year, when we don't really know what the situation is going to be like going forward for the rest of the year in terms of coronavirus. So I think for me that I think that says it all. I think this is just the FIA feel that they have to now press ahead. They've backed themselves into a bit of a corner with it seems to me. So there we are. So, but it's going to be interesting to see the cars. From an engineering perspective, it's going to be interesting. But for me, I still have some really big questions about the strategy. I'm not against the idea of World Rally cars becoming hybrid, but I'm definitely against the proposed chassis structure going forward. I think that's a real step away from the principles of rallying, and I think in the cost world and the way things are changing, I think there was just a better way to go about it. And then you have to factor in this wild card that we've seen from New Zealand with Hayden Paddon coming out with this electric rally car, which, I mean, ultimately he's just made the FIA look like they're 5 years behind the curve with a small team from down under. So I think, you know, that for me has just made the current situation look even more ridiculous. But there we go. It's going to be interesting to see how that develops and whether we get a glimpse at the Toyota. I think the Hyundai's probably a little bit further down the road, but we'll have to wait and see, won't we? Let's talk about rallies, because we had 2 over the weekend, 3 really. So the little one I don't really want to talk about too much was the Snetterton round of the Circuit Rally Championship in the UK. If you're outside the UK, you won't necessarily know too much about it, but it's basically a championship that goes around a selection of circuits, and it's kind of a nice accessible way for people to see some rallying. This year not very accessible because no spectators were allowed, which for me was a really big disappointment. We are starting to see spectators at some sporting events in the UK now, so why we couldn't have them at a big exposed open outdoor venue like a race circuit is a bit confusing for me. And it was a real shame because it was a really good entry. It was nice to see such a strong entry of four-wheel drive cars rather than the event being dominated by Escorts and Darrians and things. So it was nice to see so many of those cars, and we had Reese Yates won that event in a R5 Mark II, beating Frank Bird in another R5 Mark II Fiesta. So yeah, I thought that was really good, really good. Next event was the Olympus Rally in the US, third round of the US Championship. This was very important, I think. Firstly, because Travis Pastrana won his 3rd event in a row, and I think you have to say that he looks in a very, very, very good position to win the championship this year. I think the big news really though was Ken Block coming back and just before the rally started announcing that he was going to be doing the rest of the season in a Subaru, so basically the same car that Pastrana is in. So that's going to mix things up a little bit, I hope. I think he had a reasonable run, came 2nd. You know, I think it was too much to expect him to challenge Pastrana too hard in this rally. Needs to get used to the car again, doesn't he, and get back into that groove with that type of car. So I think that's going to be really good. It was a shame that we didn't see Barry McKenna. He pulled out at the last minute. But I think the US Championship continues to go from strength to strength, doesn't it? I think it continues to develop. We see more Irish drivers over there this time in Rally 2 cars. So I think it's becoming a more and more important proving ground for people and a more relevant part of the global rallying scene. So I think that's really exciting. It's going to be really exciting to see how Block gets on, you know, as he goes forward. He's also doing East African Safari Classic in a Tuthill 911, which is another interesting story, isn't it? So definitely looking forward to seeing how he gets on with that car and that event. So that was that. Washed over those 2 pretty quickly because I want to get onto the main one, which was Rally Croatia, which was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I think that was one of the best WRC events we've seen for quite a long time. I think the level of competitiveness was brilliant as always. The closeness of the fight was brilliant. The climax was brilliant. Again, it was a shame that it was officially closed to spectators. There were quite a few that got there, which I don't know. I mean, yes, you know, the rule thing, I get it. I get the whole need for being sensible, but again, outdoor, for me it was nice to see people getting to enjoy that event. And according to something I read earlier today on a well-known rallying website, you know, spectator estimates, if that was an open event, were very high. So I think Eastern Europe is a very popular place in terms of rallying. So it's nice to see those countries getting to have that exposure and the fans there getting to see those events and see those cars. So that's really encouraging for me, and I'm never going to complain at there being more tarmac. On to the event itself. Well, the obvious story is the winner. Ogier's impressive on the stage. Ogier's performance, get my words out, on the stages was really impressive, wasn't it? I think his last stage performance was typical Ogier, bit of a mistake, but really pushing and showed why he is in the position that he is in. The road thing, I don't want to get into that too much. The accidents happen. I've seen a few people with this bizarre claim that because he's a 7-time world champion, potentially an 8-time world champion, that he shouldn't have a crash on the road. I mean, that's just utter horse something, isn't it? Accidents can happen to anyone, so I think that part of it, ignore. What happened afterwards? Well, a few people have said that he should have been excluded. I suspect fewer people would be saying that he should be excluded in this country had it not been Ogier in that position. If we were talking about Elfyn Evans having won the rally but had an accident on the road and a run-in with the police, I suspect far fewer British folk would be saying that he should have been excluded. I understand the arguments from David Evans and people about his exclusion, and I do think we have to be very cautious when it comes to the PR element. That being said, him making the apology, paying the fine, and being photographed with the police later, I think shows that there was it's issue solved. If they had felt that there was a major problem, then yes, perhaps. But in the aftermath, they were obviously happy with the situation. If they weren't, they wouldn't have let him post that picture. So I think for me, time to move on. Similarly for the traffic light thing, yes, he jumped a red light. That was a mistake. He shouldn't have done it. But again, he's human. It was a stressful situation. He just left the scene of the accident. He was in a hurry to get to the stage. We all have lapses of concentration, even the very best drivers in the world. I don't think we can say that he intentionally jumped that red light with any certainty. So just for me, he's made a statement. Yes, maybe he should put himself out there a little bit more on the road safety side and say, I need to do this, do that, and you need to drive sensibly. But I think for me, it's just a bit of a non story, really, and we should just move on from it. It was a great drive, wasn't it? On the stages, that's the important thing. It was a fantastic drive. Evans, for me, that climax with Evans missing out by half a second. I think that perhaps shows where Evans, there's just that little bit of room for improvement still, isn't there? There's just that little bit of room for him to go a little bit further. I think in terms of speed and general consistency, he is up there with Ogier, Tanak and Neuville. He's right there. I think just putting the event to bed on that last stage and just having that last little push when you need to, I think there's just a little bit of room for him to improve there still. And I think there's nothing to suggest that he won't do that. I still believe that he has that in him and that he can be that complete driver. I think we're still seeing him develop. So I think it was painful for him to miss out in the way that he did, and it was such a minor mistake, wasn't it? But I think he will continue to develop. He will learn from that and keep pushing himself and get a handle on that last little bit of closing the door on everyone and sealing the wins like that. So that was really something, wasn't it? I think the other real story from the event was probably Hyundai. So Neuville has obviously got a handle on that car and is driving very well at the moment and is consistently putting in podium finishes despite the co-driver dramas that he seems to have now got over. So that's very encouraging. The others, Tanak just wasn't quite at the races, was he? Similarly for Breen had some tyre issues, I know, but just for Tanak to be a minute and a half roughly off the winner, it's just, from what we've seen from him over the last couple of years, isn't what you'd expect. I think that car is not quite where he wants it on tarmac. Similarly for Breen, I don't think he was quite in the zone with the car on, and there's some work for Hyundai there, isn't there? There's definitely some work. But it was a great rally, so I think we should be very thankful for that and very pleased to see that rally on the calendar, and hopefully it will come back. Portugal next. Running order, I think, is going to be a big deal. Ogier made some comments about that before Croatia, didn't he? But finds himself in the lead, and we know what he can do from the lead despite running order issues. So that's that. I'm going to wrap it up there because we're at almost 15 minutes, so it's time to shut up, isn't it? But there's been lots happening. I think we've got a bit of a break before Portugal, but I think there's going to continue to be news, hopefully with the new cars and things. So thank you for watching, as always. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've got any disagree with me about the Ogier thing, do let me know in the comments, because I'm sure some of you will, and I will catch you again next time. Thanks for watching.